As your company grows, it really helps to keep an eye on what your employee costs are. Now, that doesn't just include the salary and bonus, but also all of the taxes and benefits that come with it. And that's exactly why we've built this model. Hi, I'm Andrew Childress for B-Ball, and I'm going to teach you to use our employee cost model to help you monitor, project, and keep an eye on those total costs. Now, this model has a number of tabs as you would expect, and I'm going to walk you through how to use them so that you can take advantage of our really robust model to calculate employee cost. The first of these is the benefits table, so let's go ahead and switch over to it. Now, this benefits table that you see here is for both the taxes and benefits that each employee incurs. And what we're doing here is using a mix of percentage-based calculations plus flat rate amounts that don't really vary by employee. So going through this list here, you can see that on the top half, we do have the taxes. And I want to make it really clear that this entire model is really built with the United States tax and benefit structure in mind. So what we have here are the tax rates that we've researched and analyzed here for you. And you can see the different percentages that we have. Coming down to the unemployment federal portion at a maximum of $420, the model will help you calculate this even though it's 6% of most employee wages. We also have some various ranges in the unemployment, the state level amounts. It tends to range between 2.7 and 3.4%, so we've used the midpoint of that as well. All of these are totally adjustable, so if you get new information or something that's more specific to your company, you can always fill these in with your precise amounts. Down in the benefits section, same idea. We've gone out and researched really what insurance tends to be and picked a midpoint. But of course, you can always work through your own benefits department or benefits providers and come up with more precise amounts that are specific to your company, for example. So with all of those filled in, remember, these are what all of our calculations are going to be based off of. They're going to take the employee's salary and bonus and add these to it so that we do get to that full employee cost amount that's really helpful for forecasting and projections. Let's go ahead and jump over to where we fill in our employee level details. Let's start off by jumping to the current employees tab. And this is really where you're going to fill in those employees that you already have on your payroll, that the information's already known for, into the table. Now, this table has most of the fields you would probably expect to think about as you're doing financial planning. So the first is, of course, the employee name. Then we're going to have the role, just so you can keep track of what each role costs. The department, many organizations will also call this a cost center, so it's helpful to have that as a way of grouping up costs into a standard functional area. Country, for this example, I'm going to have United States for everything because our model is built with that in mind. And then the salary and bonus percentage. And that bonus percentage is expressed as a percent of the salary. And we actually have it built into the model to help you do all those calculations for you. These are really important to capture so that we can make all of those other calculations that we talked about on the benefits table with the percent-based adjustments. So most HR systems will help you download data in this format about your current employee base and then just fill in this table with the needed fields. And again, all of the calculations are going to happen for you on the back end automatically. Now, of course, hopefully you're in growth mode and you have some potential hires coming on as well. And we handle these through the Forecast Potential Hires tab. Now, this is basically the same format that you saw in the last tab, but with one twist that's really helpful. First, in the role field, I tend to like to fill this in with forecasted hire. And then what I also have is that start month, and that's the month that I anticipate the employee coming on my payroll. And this is really important because when you're doing a budget or a financial forecast, you need to calculate it if the expense is only for a partial year so that you have an accurate outlook. And again, what this will actually do on the back end of the model is take that start month and only begin to project the employee expense at that point. If we jump back to the current employees tab here, one of the ways that this all works is with this data refresh all button. The refresh all button, anytime you change anything in any of these three tables we've looked at so far, if you hit that refresh all button, everything will automatically recalculate. Clicking on this queries and connections menu, you can see I've got these queries on the back end, and this uses an Excel technology called Power Query, but you don't really have to touch these. I've already built everything for you, and now it's just a matter of refreshing all as periodically needed. When you hit that, the model will recalculate and run all of the information through the calculations that have been built. So what do you do with this data? Well, let's jump over to the analysis tabs, and I'm going to start with expense by category. Now, this is a good all in look at all of the expenses that we're going to have for all of our employees based on the inputs that we have. So you can see in the top section, we've got the total of the monthly salary and the monthly bonus expense, and those sum up to be the total compensation amount. So these are really kind of the amounts that are going to go directly to the employee as mostly cash compensation, and they are based off each employee's specific salary and their bonus percentage. Now below that, we have all of the taxes and benefits, and they follow those calculations that we had in the benefits table. So if it was a percent-based calculation, it's going to be based off the comp section. But if it was a flat rate amount, we're going to put that same amount in for each employee. So in the case of medical benefits, for example, those are going to be about the same for each employee, and you'll see that reflected in the table. So let's look at an example of this. These boxes out to the side here, these are called slicers, and I love these as a way of analyzing our data at a little bit lower level. If I click on one of these boxes in the slicer, the entire table updates to reflect only that thing that I've clicked on. So as I click on one employee name, you can see the entire table updates accordingly. And just as we discussed, we have that person's salary and bonus expense, percent-based calculations on the taxes, and then flat rate standard amounts down in the benefits section like health insurance. You can see if I switch to another employee, some fields will change, but those standard fields will stay the same because they are flat rate amounts. Let's go ahead and toggle that off with the filter button in the upper right corner. Now, another way that you can filter and slice and dice this data is at a department level, and this really helps you answer the question of how much each area costs. If I click on accounting, for example, now the table only shows those expenses relevant to accounting. And in the top table, you can see it kind of grays out people that aren't in that first selection. So now let's think about how this works if we do make a change. And to kind of prove out that these calculations work, what I'm going to do here is actually copy and paste as values that total employee cost line down below. This is a good practice in Excel anytime you change anything so you have a feel for what's changed and make sure that your calculations are working. I'm going to go back to the current employees tab, and now I'm going to add a new employee record on its own line. So let's say that I started this model some time ago, and now I need to update it with my current headcount. So I just fill in all of those fields that we've filled in the past, like the employee name, role, department, salary, and bonus percentage, of course. And at this point, what I'm going to do is jump back to my expense by category section. Remember, you're always going to come up to this Data Refresh All button and click it, and actually Excel now handles all of the calculations needed on the back end. So let's give this just a second here. So now you can see by comparing it to that line we pasted as values that the amounts changed here. That shows us that our calculations are working great, and they do change. I'm going to click on the one employee that we just added, and now you can see that person's expenses are all updated in the sheet above. So this is working really nice, and you can see here that it's really dynamic as our employee roster changes. Now that's one example of how to update the data, and now let's look at some of the other tools we've built out to help you look at and analyze your employee cost. So if I go to the Forecast by Employee tab, I really love this approach to see the low-level breakdown of each employee's total employee cost, which you can see in the upper left corner here. It has each employee and then a projection of their total expenses over the time horizon. But let's say for a moment that we wanted to view some other type of expense that we have calculated. Let's say I'm not necessarily interested in the total employee cost, but instead I'd rather look at another values field that I have in my pivot model. If I come up to the PivotTable Analyze option and click on Field List if this doesn't automatically open, we now have the fields that we can use from our original data set. So now let's say I just want to know each employee's bonus expense. If I find the monthly bonus expense and drag it down into the values section, that's actually going to take their bonus expense by month and sum it up by year because that's my breakout. And now I'm only viewing the bonus expense portion of their compensation. But if I wanted to trade this out for total comp, which is salary and bonus, I would just come back and find that total comp field. So these tables are flexible. If you want to get in and see something specific, you can find that field from the PivotTable Fields option. Let's switch over to the Cost by Department Employee Month tab, and this is just another cut at the same data to see things in a new way. This projection takes each employee, splits it by department down the left side, and then projects the total employee cost across all those months. Now you might notice for this line that I'm looking at here, the expense only starts in April. Now that's actually exactly how it's supposed to work because this is a forecasted hire with a start date of April 1st. That way, our pivot logic actually only starts projecting there. And that's really important so that you have accurate projections for those growth hires. As I jump over to the forecast potential hires tab, you can see that that person had a start date of April 1st. So it's working exactly as we would expect. Now, last up, let's switch to the forecast by function tab. And remember, the purpose of this is to see that total employee cost by area. It's really helpful if you're using this to roll out like department level budgets, for example. I can actually click on each of the departments if I do want to narrow it down to just that view. So it's a really helpful way to kind of isolate the data you want and share it with your business partners. You can always come back to the pivot table fields list if you want to narrow it down to something other than total employee cost. Now, last up, if you feel a little lost in this model at any time, don't hesitate to come over to the instructions tab. It has all of the steps you need to really make the most of the model. This tool is going to be a great way to help you build out a really refined budget or forecast for your employee expenses. Make sure to use it with your latest and greatest data about your hiring patterns, and you're on your way to having your best forecast yet. I'm Andrew Childress for B-Bowl, and thanks again for watching.